All right, it is 10:30. All right. Hey, how's everybody doing? I want to start out by noting, some of you may have noticed MAGFest scheduled two Metal Gear panels back to back. I had no idea this was going to happen. Me and Evan, the panelist before me, we did not know of each other's existence until we randomly found each other on Blue Sky and kind of just did like the Spider-Man point at each other. So I see some of you are still here from the panel before. So can we give a round of applause to Evan for that panel? Oh man. To everyone who was stuck around after that panel, thank you very much. It's very much. It actually worked out really well because Evan's panel was about the history of Metal Gear as a series and a little synopsis of everything that came before. And this is about a very niche part of the history of the series that is still related but very, very obscure. And anyone who got here... Oh, yeah, a little closer? Yeah, thank you. And anybody who got here because they just wanted to see someone talk about a nerdy niche subject, I'm sorry that the line for Versus Wolves got cut off. Brief introductions. My name is Noel Hem, aka Sapphire Bright Eyes, and thank you very much. Last year at MAGFest, I hosted a panel around the same time in the room over there called Why the Street Fighter Movie is the Movie of All Time, which I still stand by. It was the first ever panel I had ever done at any convention. This is my second ever panel, and I wanted to say to anybody, if anybody happened to be at that panel, thank you very much for being there. There was a big turnout for that, and I never expected that. And if you're at my panel last year, you may also remember my friend Cardboard Hideo Kojima. So I was so nervous before the panel the first year that I grabbed this, which I own, don't ask, and wrapped him in a pride flag to make sure that I was not the only thing people were looking at on stage, and it worked. People seemed to like it. A little bit of an anecdote. I promise we will talk about the Metal Gear movie soon. At the 4:14 mark in the video, somebody sat down and bumped the camera. And so for the next 30 minutes of the video, he's in frame and I'm not. So if you've ever been like, Kojima's not really that much of a glory hound, I think God disagrees with you. After the Street Fighter panel, though, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do if I did another one of these. It was really important for me to find a video game movie that I had something to say about and not just pluck something out of the ether that I have no real emotional attachment to. And I thought it would be easy to talk about a video game movie that doesn't exist. Over the past few years, I have formed an obsession with Metal Gear. I've been playing through the games, diving into the lore. I even went to the first and second ever iterations of the fan-run MGS Con in California. For 2 years now, I've been meeting people who love Metal Gear, a lot of them being fantastic and incredibly creative people. Fan art and fan fiction for a long dormant series, especially one that lay dormant as long as Metal Gear, is the backbone of keeping fandom alive. And even besides that, a lot of creatives I've met cite the Metal Gear series as a big personal inspiration. And I think that a lot of that is because Metal Gear is a wildly creative series made by a wildly creative person. Hideo Kojima, and given the cardboard cutout this is a very no-shit statement, is one of my personal heroes. His games are full of influence from movies and music he loves all around the world, creating this wild new vision out of the things he adores. And as a film and music nerd with aspirations of being a filmmaker, it's very hard to not identify with the guy at least a little bit. He's absolutely not beyond criticism, but his work is always so charming and he's such an open fanboy for the people he collaborates with that I can't help but be just a little bit endeared to it. However, despite Kojima's love and passion for cinema, his games are yet to make the jump to the silver screen despite decades of attempts and negotiations. In 2023, it was announced that Kojima had partnered with the independent film studio A24 to produce a Death Stranding movie. As of 2025, there is nothing to show for that except for a disgustingly priced $40 t-shirt. Movies take a long time to make, and Kojima's working on about, I want to say, 2 or 3 games right now. I don't expect major updates on this anytime soon. On the other end of Kojima adaptations, however, and taking a long time to get made, we have the Metal Gear series. In May 2006, yes, it's been that long, Kojima announced at E3 that he would be attempting to have Metal Gear adapted into a Hollywood movie. The first announcement of the Metal Gear movie was nearly 19 years ago, and since then, the project has gone through different producers, writers, directors, and even an actor for Solid Snake. And it would be one thing if the movie's development was just radio silent, but it hasn't been, and our most recent update is from July of last year, with one of the film's producers stating the script is still being worked on. It's fairly obvious that Metal Gear, the series that is genetically made of Hollywood movies Kojima loves, has potential as a Hollywood movie. And like many Metal Gear fans, I've even thought about like what my ideal Metal Gear movie would look like in my head. Who would be cast in it, what would it look like how would it sound, and most importantly, how the fuck Psycho Mantis would work. My only current idea of how to get Psycho Mantis' fourth wall breaking to work in the same fashion as MGS1 would be that the character in the movie somehow reads the audience's AMC A-list Stubs memberships. How that would be managed, I don't know, and we don't have time to get into the legal and ethical problems of that concept. Well, someone here does. So I decided to look into the Metal Gear movie's development history. I wanted to learn the specific bumps in the road and figure out why the Metal Gear movie doesn't exist. And I wanted to have hope that the silver screen adaptation, this video game series I love will get the silver screen adaptation it deserves someday. And after all the research I've done, my optimism for the Metal Gear movie is, well, it's not gone. But Not Gone is about as good as it's going right now, if I'm being honest. However, so join me on this little rabbit hole I've found, and to get us started, I decided to go back to the panel I did last year, and I found the moment that Kojima was pushed into frame, and I decided to make a little intro out of it. Hold on, let me see if this works.
I will never truly know, however, and this is a perfect example of that because I'm instead a 21-year-old in 2024 who thinks Street Fighter is the coolest thing ever. And I bought this movie on Blu-ray with my own money.
Sing along if you know the words. I'm gonna drink this water now. This is fast forwarded by 900%. I'm searching and I'll melt into you. What a fear in my heart, but you're so supreme. I give my life, not for honor, but for you, Snake Eater. In my time, there'll be no one else. Crime is the way I've lied to you. I'm still in a dream, Snake Eater. Thank you for helping MAGFest not get copyright struck. Someday you'll go through the rain, and someday you'll feed on a tree frog. It's ordeal, the trial to survive for the day we seek new light. I give my life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, That's true.
I'm still in a dream, snake eater. I'm still in a dream, snake eater.
Thank you very much. Oh, and here's where they finally fix it.
In humble gratitude.
For the record, I believe this is being recorded. If the guy who did that ever sees this, no hard feelings. That was really funny. MAGFest, I know we're all having fun. It's late on a Friday night, and there's so much fun stuff we could be doing at this con. So who's ready to learn about movie producers? Yay! Part 1, Michael DeLuca. Part 1, Michael DeLuca and the First Attempt. This is film producer Michael DeLuca. He was the former president of production at New Line Cinema through the entirety of the 90s and remained there until the end of the decade. In the 2000s, DeLuca signed a deal with Sony Pictures to produce films for the studio. The quality of these films ranged from Ghost Rider to Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. For the record, DeLuca has actually produced some really solid films. In the 90s at New Line, he produced The Mask and Pleasantville and Dark City, a lot of cult classics like that. Huh? Well, he also produced one of my favorite movies of all time, The Social Network. And a movie having a good producer is absolutely an important part of the process. It's just not something that is thought very much by the general audiences. I've never left a movie theater and gone, man, that movie had such great producing. In 2007, 3 years before The Social Network would land him an Oscar nomination, DeLuca was officially set to produce the Metal Gear movie at Sony Pictures. Over the next 3 years, updates would be scattered, something that would become a common trend with the film's development. And as an interesting historical note, at one point, professional screenwriter and voice of Solid Snake himself, David Hayter, submitted a treatment. It's described as the apocalypse now of the digital age. This treatment was ultimately passed on, which I have no opinion on because I haven't read it and probably never will, but it is odd for a big Metal Gear installment to pass on David Hayter. Anyway. In 2010, DeLuca told Steven Weintraub of Collider that unfortunately the film was unlikely to come to fruition, providing what is, quite frankly, an invaluable amount of transparency about the project. And I'm going to read this quote in full because it gives something that I honestly didn't think I would find with this panel, a direct answer to the question, why doesn't the Metal Gear movie exist? Actually, this is a long one. Let me take a drink of water. Hydration is important. I don't think it's going to move forward because I got the sense that there may not be enough of a coordinated will at this point on the side of certain parties to see a movie get made. And I get it because the problem with a lot of these adaptations is it's such a huge franchise for the video game company. A movie can only hurt. If the movie's great, you're probably going to sell more games. It's such a separate thing. The franchise being as big as it is kind of helps the movie. I'm not sure the movie does the same thing for the game. Very, very damning but accurate statement. And I think the interesting thing to me about DeLuca's statement is the landscape of video game history, the history of video game adaptations up to that point. The 2000s were marred by video game movies that managed either to be faithful to the source material or good on their own merits. Particularly, these video game movies were also not really worked on closely by the people who made the games. There were exceptions to this. I talked in my panel last year about how the 90s Street Fighter movie was directly financed and produced by Capcom. But again, that's an exception in what was, at this point, a 20-year rule. From what DeLuca gave away, it seems like Konami was afraid a bad adaptation of Metal Gear would make people want to stop buying Metal Gear games, a problem they would later fix when they stopped making Metal Gear games. So unfortunately, right here in 2010, at this point, the movie appears to be dead in the water. Flash forward to 2 years later. It's 2012, and the Metal Gear series is... went too far. Metal Gear series is officially celebrating its 25th anniversary when it's announced that the Metal Gear movie is back on. I am going to reveal a critical piece of information about who's in charge of the Metal Gear movie, specifically the producer who was quoted in that IGN article I mentioned earlier. When I show this man's name, some of you are probably not going to know who he is, and some of you will probably react with a disappointed groan or worse. So let's see how hard the room is split. You ready? Lot from the back half there. Part 2, goddamn motherfucking Avi Arad. On August 30th, 2012, Konami announced the film was back in development at Sony under producers Avi Arad and his brother Ari. Now, for those in the room who didn't react to this man's face and name with some primal utterance of malcontent, here's a history lesson. In the early 2000s, Avi Arad was in charge of Marvel Entertainment. In a bid to get the company out of bankruptcy, Arad began selling the movie rights to various Marvel characters to different studios. New Line Cinema got Blade, 20th Century Fox got X-Men, Sony got Spider-Man, so on and so on. Before Arad left Marvel, he even helped get the first Iron Man off the ground, making him an instrumental part of the MCU getting on its feet in the first place. However, that is not what people remember Avi Arad for. One of the decisions that Arad is arguably the most infamous for in comic book circles was telling Sam Raimi to add Venom into Spider-Man 3. As the story goes, Arad convinced Raimi that he needed to incorporate a villain the kids nowadays were more into as opposed to the characters Raimi grew up reading about. The results of that decision speak for themselves. As well, Arad is still a producer of basically every piece of Spider-Man media that gets put in theaters from Sony, and he has been a big part of Sony's stupid Spider-Man without Spider-Man cinematic universe. He is a producer on all of these movies. So if the Metal Gear movie ever does get released, ever does get finished and a trailer gets released, all I can hope for, at bare minimum, is to see the words, "From the people who brought you Madam Web." Currently, Arad Productions owns the film rights to various video game franchises, including, of course, Metal Gear. And over the past few years, Arad has actually pushed development of the film forward a significant amount, which we'll get into very soon. And hey, Arad has actually made good decisions as a producer before. For Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, he actually suggested that the character The Spot would be the film's antagonist. And that worked really well, so I'll give him a little bit of credit for an odd choice that ended up being the right one. So with that said, let's give him a chance and look on the side of his video game movies. Let's see what Arad's most recent video game adaptation was and how it did. Oh, sweet lord, we are fucked. So, I have a little bit of a shameful admission. I have seen the Borderlands movie. Not in its entirety. I didn't see the last 20 minutes of it because I watched it on a flight that was shorter than the movie. And by the end, I had no real desire to go back and finish it. Fair enough, yeah. It's not. I wouldn't even describe the Borderlands movie as being offensively bad. It's another bland Guardians of the Galaxy clone, and even as someone who isn't particularly fond of the Borderlands series, I wish it felt more like Borderlands, or anything for that matter. It's just kind of a nothing movie. And Arad has only produced one other finished and released video game movie, and I haven't seen this one, but raise your hand if you have. Raise your hand if you've seen the Uncharted movie starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Okay, couple people. I don't believe any of you. No, I don't believe any of you. No offense, but I just have like, I'll keep it in mind. Okay. Well, because for the longest time, I I just have like a brain aversion to believing this movie is real. I've only, like, you could hand me your ticket stub and I'd be like, this is fake and you're a paid actor. I've only ever seen the clip of the Nolan North cameo, so as far as I'm concerned, this is a very expensive commercial that Sony made. For what? Who's to say? Speaking of iconic voice actors, I made a joke earlier referencing Metal Gear Solid 5 and the decision to replace David Hayter's iconic voice for Snake with famous actor Kiefer Sutherland. And I think that's universally agreed to be kind of a shitty move. And I want to hear Kojima talk about how that came to be, and I think you'll find this interesting.
Furthermore, the game takes place in 1984, when Snake is 49 years old. Therefore, we needed someone who could genuinely convey both the facial and vocal qualities of a man in his late 40s. It's different from anything we've done before, so I asked a producer friend of mine in Hollywood, Avi Arad, for advice. He's the one who introduced me to Mr. Kiefer Sutherland, and I was like, why didn't I think of that?
So we were at dinner in Japan celebrating the 25th anniversary of Metal Gear Solid. And we started talking about actors. And I said to him, why don't you go for Kiefer Sutherland? Whenever I think of Snake, I think of a certain voice delivery. And Kiefer has this fantastic, rich voice that maintains a level of mystery to it.
It's an honor to be able to play this character.
Kiefer, I have to be real. We love you, but we don't embrace you, is how we basically feel at this point. I also need to be clear about that. I don't think this absolves Kojima of the decision at all, because at the end of the day, he still said yes to recasting David Hayter. But it is really interesting to me that Avi Arad was involved in one of the most controversial decisions that the series ever made. So let's update that graphic from the people who brought you Madam Web, Borderlands, and recasting David Hayter. Why is it out of frame? Correct. With Arad's horrible track record for video game involvement in mind, however, we should also talk about who else is working on the film currently. Arad is not a writer or a director. His job is to find a writer and director who can make this movie work. In 2014, that director arrived to them in the form of filmmaker Jordan Vogt Roberts, fresh off the heels of his indie comedy drama, The Kings of Summer. And while a coming-of-age movie like The Kings of Summer isn't really the best point of reference for being capable to make a Metal Gear movie, in 2017, Vogt Roberts' second directorial film, happened to be a big action blockbuster about the detrimental effects of war. Part 3, Kong Skull Island. In 2017, Kong Skull Island was released in theaters. Directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts, the film is based on a story by John Gattens with a screenplay by Dan Gilroy, Max Bornstein, and Derek Connolly. The reason I'm crediting all of these people up front is that I want to emphasize that there is no one person who is the clear reason for this movie's quality. Filmmaking is a collaborative effort, especially on this scale, and while Vogt Roberts' vision for the film is clear and well executed, I don't want to treat Kong Skull Island like it solely displays why this director could work for a Metal Gear film. With that being said, Kong Skull Island fucking rocks, y'all. If you haven't seen it, let me sell you on why it rocks. The film is set during the last days of the Vietnam War where an ensemble cast of soldiers and scientists including Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, and John Goodman, just name a handful of the talent in the cast, head out to an expedition on the mysterious Skull Island. When they get to Skull Island, however, they encounter King Kong, various other kaiju ranging from cool to freaky, the native people of Skull Island, and John C. Reilly. This is a bit of a side tangent, but John C. Reilly's character, Hank Marlowe, is a standout of the film. Marlowe is a World War II fighter pilot who has been stranded on the Skull Island for decades. He wields the katana of his dead Japanese friend and wears a jacket with an Akira reference on the back so blatant that I can't believe that it's in this movie, let alone that they wrote this character and cast Dr. Steve Brule to play him. It is, genuinely, a fucking great time. For one thing, the film looks gorgeous. It's full of vibrant colors and impeccable staging.
The cinematographer of this film, third guy on the left here, is Larry Fong, who is behind some of the most striking imagery of Zack Snyder's filmography, 300, Watchmen, films like that. And I would love to see him work on a Metal Gear movie. He has an eye for working with composition and contrast that I think would serve the visuals of a Metal Gear movie well. And the ensemble cast is great too. One thing I love about it is how it's a mix of big actors and strong supporting performances that gives the impression that no one on this expedition is safer than the next guy. The first time I saw this film, I basically had no idea who was going to make it off of Skull Island for sure, and that feels like something I haven't seen in a big blockbuster in a long time. It's also important to mention the film isn't just set during the Vietnam War, but draws a direct parallel between the war and the expedition to Skull Island. The cast of the film is sent to Skull Island and immediately begins dropping seismic bombs as a method of mapping out the island, which awakens these fucking things called skull crawlers, and from there the cast is slowly but surely picked off one by one. Nobody on Skull Island died for a good cause, they were just sent to die, and it was a massive loss of life that could have been easily avoided. And I could go into this all day, and quite frankly I would love to, but that is not the panel I signed up for. I bring up Skull Island because of the sheer talent between the film and the Metal Gear movie. But Skull Island is probably one of my favorite of the MonsterVerse movies, and I am glad it exists because it's genuinely very enjoyable. In 2014, novelist and screenwriter Jay Basu was initially hired to write the Metal Gear movie. Not much about his version of the screenplay is known, so I don't really have anything to say about it. But after the success of Skull Island, Sony hired one of that film's screenwriters, Derek Connolly, to rewrite Basu's version of the film. And that sounds like a good sign because the way that Skull Island is able to weave over-the-top action with these strong political themes feels like that's a great pick for a Metal Gear movie. And that's about it for now. There have been updates on the screenplay since then, nothing specific, just that it's still being worked on and refined. Besides that, we did get one big piece of casting news for a period of time. In December 2020, Oscar Isaac was confirmed to be playing Solid Snake in the film, which was honestly really exciting to hear. I think he's a really good pick for the role, sorry, 1 second. This was exciting to hear at the time. It's like, oh wow, he's gonna be Snake. That's a great choice. He's a very strong actor in both. He works well in both franchise films and stronger like screenplay driven stuff. He is great. Sorry, Brian. He's well known enough to bring in audiences, but he's also just a strong enough performer on his own that he could handle something like Snake, especially if he's playing the multiple roles of Snake. However, in 2024, insider Daniel Rickman did state that he may have left the project entirely, which leaves me in the very strange place of the very strange position of he might not be there, but I have no idea for sure, and that is very not encouraging. And this right here is one of the biggest reasons why I can no longer get excited about this movie. And what I've just covered bit by bit is everything noteworthy that has happened across almost 2 full decades, and I can't say that length of time inspires much hope. The producer is infamous for having his hand in bad adaptations. The script is still being worked on, and as of last year, the lead actor allegedly left the project entirely. And in 3 statements, that is the current status of the Metal Gear movie. And the other reason that I'm not looking forward to the Metal Gear movie is Jordan Vogt-Roberts himself, and this is the kind of not fun part that I have to bring up. Back in December of 2017, actress Dana DeArmond tweeted allegations of harassment from both Jordan Vogt-Roberts and actor T.J. Miller on the set of the 2020 Comedy Central series Mashup. Specifically with Vogt-Roberts, she claimed the director walked her to the car and leaned in for a kiss. When DeArmond rejected the advance, he allegedly said, "Don't make it weird," and kissed her anyway. So I shouldn't even need to state this, but there is absolutely no fucking excuse for that kind of behavior, and thank you. Throw him in the trash, exactly. I like that guy's idea better. Throw him into the sun. This is... We're getting a lot of great pitches for this right now. I'm honestly glad because this is the part I was the most nervous about talking about. And I shouldn't even have to say it, but because of this, I am not comfortable with this man working on the Metal Gear movie. As recently as last year, Jordan Vogt Roberts is still getting work, namely directing 2 episodes of the comedy horror series Hysteria. And as far as I can tell, he is still attached to direct the Metal Gear movie. And if the movie ever comes to fruition, I do not plan on supporting it if he is still in the director's chair. And I want to apologize for veering into some uncomfortable subject matter, but again, I wouldn't feel right addressing a project that he was attached to without mentioning something serious like that. When I initially wrote the panel, I was stumped on where to take it from here, because when I started writing this and started looking into it, I wanted to find some sort of hidden gem, some sort of ray of hope that this movie could be great and it could come out and everything would be fine, but I'm not sure if I have that. And so at this point, I scrolled up back to the first page of my drafts, trying to think about what I could say to not leave this on a dour note, and that's when it clicked. I mentioned at the start of this panel that I often think about what my ideal version of a Metal Gear movie would look like, and specifically, I've always fantasized about what Metal Gear Solid 1 would look like on the big screen. It's one of my favorites in the series, but also it just makes the most sense as a starting point if Metal Gear was going to be a movie. It connects the events of the first 2 MSX games, and it's the first 3D entry of the series using the shift in visuals to make the game more cinematic. And I've thought a lot about how I would do the big moments, the small moments, the things we don't see directly in the game, the big action set pieces, Psycho Mantis reading your AMC A-List Does memberships. I could go on for hours. So that gave me a thought. As a creative and somebody who aspires to be a filmmaker, I took a little bit of time away from this panel. I thought about the movies I love, the movies that Metal Gear shares DNA with, and I started writing my own personal idea of what an MGS movie would look like. And I wanted to find the answer to one simple question. Could I make the Metal Gear movie? Yeah, no, making movies is really hard and expensive, and I don't really know how to do things like blow up a tank or choreograph a cyborg ninja fight, so I'm not the guy for this. As much as I would love to someday just personally write out my own idea of what an MGS1 movie would look like, it would be basically nothing more than fan fiction, and if nothing else, I have the self-awareness not to take up a time slot at convention to be like, hey guys, wouldn't this be so cool, aren't I so smart? And if I ever unironically do that, you all have permission to come up on the stage yourselves and beat me up. Look, like, if I was going to pitch someone to make the Metal Gear movie, it wouldn't be me. I could barely get this panel done on time. If I was to suggest people to helm a project like that, they would have to be actual experienced writers and directors, people who have made films that show their capability with the material that a Metal Gear adaptation would consist of. So I decided, why not? Why not write up a list of filmmakers I like who could handle the Metal Gear movie? They're probably not going to make the actual movie, but if nothing else, I can talk about talented working directors I like. And y'all might even come away from this panel with some new movies to check out. Obviously, Kojima has a lot of director friends, so let's start with a few examples of directors we know that are for sure admirers of Kojima's work. Beginning with one of my favorite directors, Guillermo del Toro. Pros, he directed Pacific Rim. Shall I go on? I will. Del Toro's films have always held a strong anti-war sentiment influenced by Del Toro's own childhood growing up in war-torn Guadalajara. A lot of his films take place in fascist or militaristic settings, usually intertwined with aspects of magical realism and human connection. In other words, Guillermo del Toro films ask the question, do you think love could bloom on a battlefield? Thank you for the golf clap. The biggest con to this idea is that Del Toro probably has no interest in working with Konami after PT and Silent Hills. And given that Del Toro has not spoken kindly about Konami since then, the feeling is most likely mutual from the company. And I see that a lot of people here are familiar with Del Toro and a lot of you are probably as big of a nerd of him as mine. And if I had to recommend some of my favorite Del Toro films to someone who wants to get into them, I'm a little bit of a basic bitch in the fact that I think Pan's Labyrinth is still one of the strongest things he's ever directed. But I also have a massive fondness for his recent stop-motion Pinocchio movie with the late great Mark Gustafsson. And if there's one I would call underrated, it's Nightmare Alley, which stars an incredible performance from Bradley Cooper. Also this year, they will be releasing his long-awaited adaptation of Frankenstein, also starring Oscar Isaac. And I'm very much looking forward to that. Moving on from Del Toro, though, Danish director Nicholas Winding Refn, best known for Drive, a very solid art house theater that got co-opted by meme culture, is one of Kojima's closest personal friends. By the way, I have seen at least one person here at this con wearing the Drive jacket. And I'm surprised it's only one. Unfortunately, Refn's style of filmmaking tends to lean towards the slow and melancholic in a way that I don't think works for a mass appeal spy action movie. And I bring him up because of his ties with Kojima and the fact that he has made really solid films. And I would recommend Refn's work if you're really into these meditative, heavily stylized kind of films, even though they can be a bit up their own ass at times. And this one I felt the guiltiest about because it's like just naming a great director who I would want to see make this movie. Jordan Peele is an incredible filmmaker who can do whatever the fuck he wants as far as I'm concerned. And he and Kojima are currently working on a video game together. And at the Game Awards, Jordan Peele literally came on stage and talked about how Metal Gear Solid 2 was a masterpiece. And I mention him here because of that, but also in a world where he's getting blank checks to basically make whatever he wants. I would hate to see him just make some kind of IP movie. Yeah, what's up?
I find it interesting, back then for Nope, because have you ever heard of Nope read as a Dexter movie? Well, I mean, heard of it, but that's very interesting because Hideo Kojima obviously does a lot of great westerns and American stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be a cowboy.
No, absolutely, yeah. Like I think Nope, and if you haven't seen Nope, that is probably the one that I would recommend the most. I loved that movie so much. I think that's the first big like spectacle movie he's ever made, and it is a great time. And he did a great job with that, along with cinematographer Hoyte van Hoytema, of like capturing the size and scale of everything with IMAX. And I think, and obviously that could work for a Metal Gear movie, but my thing is, I would just rather see more Jordan Peele movies than a Jordan Peele Metal Gear movie. But outside of Kojima's circle, I wanted to try to think of a couple other filmmakers that I can tell you for certain that I think could work for this. And one of the names that first came to mind was a man named Chad Stahelski. Stahelski is a very obvious pick because he's great at directing action. The John Wick films have seen him direct action set pieces in basically any style he and the action team could think of. Set pieces as big as vehicle combat or two enemies engaged in a fistfight end at all, solid V-Liquid style. I also specifically want to mention the writer of the John Wick series, Derek Kolstad. His character work is the beating heart of why John Wick is so memorable to me. He's very good at writing characters who are quickly endearing and have stylish quirks, which is perfect for Metal Gear. A few years ago, Kolstad wrote the action film Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk. And if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It is getting a sequel soon. Woo! Christopher Lloyd is great in that movie. When it comes to suspense and action films, I feel like there's few directors who capture it better than the Raid director Gareth Evans. Much like MGS1, the Raid is set in one location full of trained killers, focusing on a small number of combat-ready yet overwhelmed people who must escape with their lives. Evans is also great at shooting one-on-one fights, bringing a brutality and a kinetic feeling to them, or I'd love to see him handle things like the Grey Fox fights. I think he could bring a very interesting dynamism to that. Evans is... if you want to check out his films, Raid and Raid 2 are a great place to start, but also his next action film, Havoc, starring Tom Hardy and Forrest Whitaker, has been in post-production hell for a number of years, but it is officially releasing on Netflix sometime later this year, and I'm very excited to watch it. In 2022, the latest entry in the Predator series, Prey, was released to audience acclaim. Dan Trachtenberg, the director of Prey, is no stranger to adapting video games because he made a Portal fan film called Portal No Escape that was honestly pretty good, but also generally, Prey just fucking rocks. It's a film about having to be stealthy and clever in pursuit of taking down something bigger and better at killing than you, which might as well just be a longer way of saying tactical espionage action. And if you haven't seen Prey, it's on Hulu, and it's genuinely one of the sickest Predator films in the entire series. Later this year, Disney is releasing 2 more Predator films directed by Trachtenberg, one of them being released in theaters in November, Predator Badlands, and then there is another one they're releasing on Hulu that was made in complete secrecy. And last on the list, Tim Miller is no stranger to both VFX-heavy films and video game adaptations. He directed the first Deadpool movie, which is full of inventive set pieces and great character work. But he's also the creator and producer of the recent video game anthology series Secret Level for Prime Video. Miller's experience as a VFX artist could lend him well to the big CGI-heavy sequences a Metal Gear film would need. And if not director, I feel like Miller would do great in a producer role. He's actually the executive producer on all 3 of the Sonic movies so far, and if that plus the best episodes of Secret Level are any indication, he's good at his damn job. And when I was making this list, I genuinely got excited, reminding myself that all of these filmmakers are releasing new work within the next couple of years. And I have no idea if a lot of these people would even be interested in a Metal Gear movie if it was offered to them, but there is something to be said about how many of them are still getting to make original, interesting work in an industry dominated by IP worship. And it feels like fewer and fewer creatives get the privilege to make their own original ideas at the scale they desire. And funny enough, one of them, those remaining auteurs, is the creator of Metal Gear himself. Part 5, Passion Projects and Letting Go. Over the course of 2015, tensions, as is very well historically known, tensions between Kojima and Konami became very high and very visible to the public. Actions from Konami, such as canceling Kojima's Silent Hills game in April, and later barring Kojima from attending the Game Awards that year, now live in infamy. And in October 2015, Kojima officially parted ways with Konami, leaving behind the rights to the decades-long series he created and worked on for so much of his life. This December, it'll have been 10 years since the newly independent Kojima Productions was founded. And I'm not going to pretend that Kojima isn't doing well for himself. In fact, he's doing so much better for himself than he ever has been. Death Stranding was a massive success, with a sequel releasing sometime this year. He's working with Jordan Peele and Xbox to make OD, a new original horror game. And at some point in the future, Sony will basically be giving this man a blank check to make a new game in the style of Metal Gear, currently under the working title Fizzant. Oh, Kojima, you have such a way of naming things. And I have no idea what Fizzant will be, and it's so far off into the future that speculating on it is very much a moot point. But knowing Kojima is soon to return to the action espionage genre is nice, especially even if it's not the same story he began almost 40 years ago now. And I think generally that's kind of my takeaway with this panel, is kind of moving on from the Metal Gear movie. And I want to see a Metal Gear movie really bad. I want to see a movie that loves Metal Gear as much as Metal Gear loves movies. Basically, every corner and aspect of the series comes from something personal from Kojima, and that includes his love from cinema. And the more I looked into the project's history and complications, especially at the scale of which it's being made, I thought back to what Michael DeLuca said, a movie can only hurt. Metal Gear is such an important series in video game history. In just a couple of years, it will celebrate 40 years since its beginnings on the MSX. It would only take the right people to capture the spirit and tone of the games, and unfortunately, I don't think the right people to the movie are attached to the movie right now. And that is really a shame. It is such an influential series, but the great thing about art, however, is not only that it takes influence from other art to exist, but it can give that influence back tenfold. I mentioned earlier that that I got into Metal Gear only a few years ago. For years after Kojima's departure, Metal Gear's existence continued primarily in the forms of pachinko machines and Metal Gear Survive. It seemed like Konami had no interest in revisiting or reviving any of the classic game series in their catalog for so long. And I got heavy into Metal Gear in early 2023, which was perfect timing, because that was right before Konami announced they still gave a shit with the announcements of the Master Collection and the upcoming Snake Eater remake. The first thing that drew me towards Metal Gear wasn't any of that, and it wasn't even like going towards playing the games in the first place. It was just the community. What happened was simply I started caring about Metal Gear because other people still cared. Talented fan artists like Maddie, aka Oh That's Raspberry, Funny Wes, who makes amazing funny Metal Gear memes, and the Kojima Frequency, which is a great Metal Gear podcast hosted by incredibly smart and talented people. The community around the series is so lovely, and I know a lot of you in the audience are passionate creative people. I am too. And there is so much great art out there inspired by or paying tribute to Metal Gear, and all you have to do is start looking, and I honestly believe that any smaller scale love letter to the series that can give more back to the series than a big blockbuster could. And I don't know if the Metal Gear movie is ever coming out, and at this point, it doesn't matter to me. To answer the question of why doesn't the Metal Gear movie exist, I think that's incredibly simple. Because at this point, 20 years onward, I honestly believe that it doesn't need to. Over the past few days, I've thought about why... over the past few days, on the side of creativity and inspiration, I've thought about how one of the things I love about this convention is how at any corner you turn, there is something creative and cool. Amazing cosplay, game showcases, talented artists, music in every hallway of the building. I always leave MAGFest inspired to do something new, to push myself a little further, to do something better. And as cheesy as it may sound, that is my takeaway is being surrounded by all of this inspiration all this time, is that to myself and to any creatives watching that are in the audience right now, I want to say genuinely, and yes, I had to phrase it like this, we build something to surpass Metal Gear. I don't say that as just a punchline at all. Metal Gear is a series made of Kojima's favorite things, and he turned those things he loved into something new and fantastic. If any of you take anything away from this panel, know that whoever you are and whatever shape it may take, I want to see your own personal Metal Gear. I'm here on the stage because I want to tell you that, for whatever it's worth to any person in this crowd, there is at least one other person here that believes you can make your passion project. Make it as strange and messy and personal as you want, because someone will want to engage with it. Take the things you love and pass them down into your own vision to make something you love. And at the end of the day, that's what Metal Gear has always been about, creating something better for the future. And it's always been endearing because it's been odd, because it's been so close to being, because it exists in pop culture so much because of all of its oddities, because of all of the things that make it a little, that draw people in, because it is very, very bizarre. At the end of the day, I will be surprised at this point if the Metal Gear movie ever comes out. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll go through different people until the sun explodes, and this is what I'm hoping for. Someday the perfect Metal Gear movie could exist in my mind, and it wouldn't even be a Metal Gear movie. Not produced by Konami or starring one of the many snakes, but I would love to see something someday with enough love and passion for Metal Gear that it passes down into something new. But until then, I can only dream of what that would look like. Except for one small thing, however. Before I let all of you go, I am happy to announce that with the help of a very talented individual, I made something special for y'all tonight. MAGFest, it's time for Psycho Mantis to read our AMC A-List Stubs memberships.
Now, let me read your mind. No, perhaps I should say your past. You saw Wicked 5 times in theaters. You're a prudent theater kid, aren't you, Snake? However, you also saw Sonic 3 on opening day. And you even bought the silly popcorn bucket. You're quite the avid moviegoer, Snake. You even went to see Kraven the Hunter. And I'm honestly just confused about that one.
I want to say thank you very much to the talented Funny West for voicing that. We are almost out of time, so I will let y'all go now. But thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I have been Sapphire Bright Eyes. You can find me on Blue Sky at Sapphire Bright Eyes at godgang.blue. That is Sapphire Bright Eyes at godgang.blue. And I will have a link up soon there with the Google Doc for all the sources I used on this panel. Go give some love to the journalists who reported on this and interviewed people about this goddamn movie for the past 20 years. I need to give a massive thank you again to the incredibly talented Funny West who did the voice of that Psycho Mantis bit. Her memes and videos are actually what got me into Metal Gear in the first place, so this is kind of a full circle moment for me. She is Funny West at bluesky.social. Thank you to our mutual friend Rattle for making this happen. Thank you, and of course, a massive thank you to MAGFest for having me. Thank you for letting me do this. Thank you to the people in the panels department who have been so helpful. Can we give a quick round of applause for the volunteers at MAGFest? Yeah. Alrighty then. It is late as fuck, so I will let you all go. Have a great night, MAGFest.